in your UI, you can actually implement that effect pretty easily. It's using a transformation called skew or shear. I never remember which one it is, but it's very easy to apply to rectangular shapes.
And motion blur just because we can. Okay, so we'll pop back to the slides now and keep going. So anticipation, this is the secondary action before the main action. Telling the user what's going to go on. Oh yeah, I didn't mean switch machines. I just meant I was switching slides. I was giving myself a cue. So this is critical in cartoons because, as we said many times, it's important to give all the information that the viewer needs so that they understand exactly what's going on at every second. Right? So show them that you're about to run and then run so that they don't lose track of the action on the screen. Well, that's also critical in GUIs. Right, because the user is going to perform actions, so wouldn't it be nice if your application made it clear to them what action is going to take place? So this is about giving information, giving hints to the user about what things are about to occur in the GUI. So we have a few different examples of this stuff. So we have a program called Anticipation. There's several buttons in here. They all, when you click on them, they issue this little visual thing. This is purely for demo purposes so that you know I'm clicking, because you probably can't hear my mouse right now. Right? So you'll notice that I hover over this button and nothing happens. And then I click and it actually does perform an action. Well, wouldn't it be nice if it actually gave you some feedback that there was something that was going to happen, or it even gave you feedback besides that visual click text that actually you did click on the button. So this one actually, it gives you the down feedback. So when I click on the button, there is a little bit of physical feedback, visual feedback from the button that something occurred, right? We have a different gradient color in the background. Well, you kind of want to give the anticipation part, which is telling the user that something is about to occur. And this button is about that, right? So we give them feedback, a different color when they're actually hovering over the button so that they know, oh, this button looks a little bit different. Maybe something different is going to happen here. And then again, there's a little bit more feedback when they actually click on the button. So all of that was just static. You know, the color changes statically there. But you could also animate this. So you can animate both the hovering feedback there as well as animating the down feedback. I personally think the down feedback is fine actually not being an animation. I think it's actually more critical to have immediate interaction than it is to have an animating action there, because you're doing something very physical and quick in the click action. But I really like the hover effect to be animated, because it's not like my mouse is here and now it's here. It's that the mouse actually moves over the button. It's actually in a transitioning state. So the animation to sort of animate to the hover color, I think, feels very natural. There is another very simple one, the glowing button, where you can sort of animate to have a glowing thing indicating, oh, this is the default button, this is something's going to happen here, and you can have a pulsation effect as long as you don't overdo it.
Can you see the glowing effect?
There's a glowing effect on the button.
Yeah, it's light blue on a white background. It doesn't work so well.
Not attractive. How about simple demos? Simple demos are good. They're easy to explain.
Can you switch to the other machine, please?
Actually, one more.
My turn.
So I like. This is not an animation thing, but it's a static feedback item. I like the close boxes on the tabs in Firefox, because it's very clear when I hover over it, oh, red X, that means close, right? It's, again, an anticipation that there's about to be an action if I do something with the mouse in that area. Now, can we switch displays, please?
They listen only to you, probably.
No, they actually implemented that feature because of me.
Okay, so
sure
Chet just showed you that basically what we call highlights in GUIs. You move the mouse over a button, it changes color, or you have this glow. We're kind of used to that. There are other effects that you can do for anticipation. So again, there's a good example on my stand that turned off by default because it's a bit, distracting. But here is the dock. So obviously, when you see that happening, you feel like there's probably something you can do with those elements. And when you compare that effect to the standard version where it's not enabled, then it's not that obvious that you can actually click on these icons. You get only the little label on the side, but that's the only feedback you get. In Aerith, yes. And we have another example here.
So he's going to show something from Aerith that people haven't seen it. This is an app that Romain wrote with Josh and Rich, 3 years ago or so, but
yeah.
A lot of the effects are sort of in there.
Yeah, so here a similar effect, we change the geometry, it's very similar to the dock that I just showed you, Or you can have little animated effects on those buttons, where you can see a little ghost of the icon like fading away to indicate that you can click on these items.
Back to the PC, please. I'll go back to the slides. Staging.
Staging, it's very similar to what I talked about for the cartoons. The idea is that you have to have a UI that clearly indicates what you want to convey. So you probably don't want too many distracting things. That's where UI design comes into play. Don't use conflicting colors. Don't try to put too much cool stuff in the UI because it's only going to be distracting. Don't try to put wallpapers in the background of your application because it's just visual noise for the user. Don't have too many animations going on at the same time. And basically, when it comes to staging, the best thing you can do, if you're not sure of what to do, stick with the default. Stick with what the UI toolkit does by default, and you're going to get a good UI. Don't put too many widgets on the screen. Keep things simple, and any animation that you do will be clearly staged. So we have an example. We have an example here.
So I've got the simple UI. I don't have time to read things, so I didn't notice that the button wanted me to not do that. And we pop up this dialog box, actually giving me a little more information about what an idiot I am. So you'll notice, hopefully you'll notice, the background is frosted out, right? So the main action is this dialogue that's imparting some textual information that I need to listen to and click on the OK button for. But at the same time, all the stuff in the background is frosted out to make sure that it goes back in the background. This is a pretty good example of staging where we basically, we've done the soft focus on the beautiful heroine so that you can focus on the heroic guy in the foreground. I don't know how that metaphor actually works. But it's pretty important, especially in this case where there is one single action that we want you to pay attention to. The rest of the stuff does not matter. Right? We could have done away with it entirely and have a black background, but this is a more approachable way of saying, you know what, less important, more important.
Can you switch to the other computer, please? So we have another example here that comes from the same demo. So if you look at this UI, the staging here was done by applying a little of a blurring effect to the labels called the task label and the album label. They're also not totally white, so we tried to put them in the background so that for the user they help to know what exactly you're looking at, but at the same time they're not too distracting when it comes to know what you can interact with. A counterexample of the staging here is that all those little reflections that you can barely see on the screen under the icons. So reflections are cool, they're very fashionable these days, but they just add clutter to this UI. And this UI would be actually better without those reflections. So the staging here could be better. There are some good elements. But that's an example of the kind of stuff you can do to look cool and without going to the extreme.
And back to the slides, please. So straight ahead versus pose to pose. I would say almost completely everything in GUI animation, computer animation overall, is pose to pose. You are the master animator in your own little universe of your ego, and you provide the extremes to the computer, and the computer automatically calculates the in-betweens. This could be interesting in-betweens where you give it actually a motion path instead of simply two endpoints and it has a linear path between them, but still you're saying, okay, button here, button there, go, and then it calculates everything in between. There are some examples of straight-ahead animation that may be used occasionally. I'll show one of those now, where we're using it for some input validation. So if we pop into everyone's favorite IDE and run input validation. So simple demo, I type in my username, I type in my password, and I get a little bit of interaction from the UI that says, I'm an idiot and I don't remember my password, right? So we color this thing and we bounce it around on the screen. I don't want smooth animation. I don't want the password field moving around saying, hey, wrong word. I want it to actually jump around and agitate the person so that they go, oh right, I'm an idiot.
A very angry UI.
Right, right. I love that effect. That's awesome. So we can see how we implemented that. You can do animations like that. I happen to use the timing framework. It's a framework I happen to be familiar with. We create a bunch of random points that it's going to jump between whenever we run this animation. We create keyframes with a discrete interpolator. So discrete interpolators just go from one value to the next over time instead of actually calculating the in-between values.
So it's an interpolator that does not interpolate.
Right, but discrete seemed lonely on its own, so we gave it an extra word.
Smart.
Then we create an animator. We use the property setter and say, okay, we're going to